Hi, Justin. Welcome, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm super pumped to have you on. It was really good timing. We were in chat. You were actually the guy who introduced me to, hey, man, you're officially on record as a powerlifter. And so I was like, I didn't even know that existed.
Right.
And it was funny because I just came from my powerlifting meet yesterday, and my coach was using it in order to see
Mhm.
how the guys were actually matching up in the competition. It's a really effective
Right.
strategy. So it
Sure.
was
Absolutely.
it was really effective. But
Yeah.
let's start off. We'll talk more about powerlifting later on. I want to actually just let you introduce yourself because we're diving right into this. I skipped the intro now, so the person can introduce themselves more formally. So why don't you tell people who you are and how you got to do what you're doing now?
Yeah. Not a problem. So my name's Justin Geisler. I am a physical therapist and online strength and nutrition coach. So my journey with physical therapy, man, it's been a little over a decade now. It's kind of wild to think how fast it goes by. But yeah, I started out actually as a physical therapist assistant. I got done with started school 2015, got done with that in 2 years, and I wasn't ready to put the books down. So I decided just to jump right in and go for the whole doctorate thing. So that journey took a while, but yes, I've been doing that for a good bit, and currently on the road. I'm doing travel physical therapy right now. So now I kind of just move every 3 to 4 months with my wife and daughter. It's a ton of fun. We're really just trying to figure out where we want to live, and but it's great. So we have the chance to just see the world and get paid for it. So it's pretty fun. But then coaching online, I recently launched that. It's been over a year now, and I kind of fell into the whole coaching role just through physical therapy. Um, do you want to talk about that, or do you just
You know
keep
what?
rolling? Or
Let's touch on a couple of these because these are really cool.
yeah,
I like
go
the
go ahead.
traveling physiotherapy. I think thought was really cool. I remember I was talking about
Mhm.
that, and so let's dive a little bit on that because I think that's already really cool. It's super unique. So tell us more about what the travel physical therapy is like.
Yeah, so you pretty much work for an agency and you have a recruiter. The recruiter just reaches out to clinics that have a need for a physical therapy position, and they're usually short term. But most clinics are always super happy if you want to extend. So the standard is 13 weeks, but they'll usually ask you ahead of time, hey, are you able to stay longer? And it really depends on the location. So here, I'm on the Oregon coast right now. We absolutely extended just because we love the location. I mean, you're right by the ocean. But the travel therapy is super nice. I mean, the pay as well. It's flexible. In between contracts, we get to travel around. Um, yeah, man, it's been a great experience. I think the first practice I worked for when I graduated, it was a ton of fun. I learned a lot, but it was just like it got a little too comfortable, and I wanted like a change. And I also couldn't see us living there like permanently in that location. So I started, we started traveling, and I tell myself, man, I wish I would have done it sooner. But at the same time, I am grateful for an opportunity that first clinic uh, gave me while I was there, like just fresh new grad and just learning stuff. So yeah,
Well, that's a really cool system, and like you had
yeah,
mentioned, to be
absolutely.
able to travel and see the world and figure out where you want to live, like it's not common for people to move from where they live. I think there's a decent percentage of people. I mean, I'm from Winnipeg,
Hmm.
Manitoba, and Winnipeg, like there's just a solid percentage of people that's like, I need to get the fuck out of here. But then there's
Right, right.
also a good percentage like myself that feel very content with it. And it's kind of a
Hmm.
scary thing. It's a difficult thing to move your life. And so for you to
Yeah,
have this kind of
totally.
work placement that you can go from place to place, and I think I look at like so many advantages there just for lifestyle, but also you mentioned the big part was learning. Because when you have
Hmm.
coworkers, you learn from your coworkers, you learn and do new atmospheres. So I think that's really incredible. And so you
Yeah.
went into your doctorate. You're currently
Hmm.
working on your doctorate, is that correct?
No, it's all finished up. So like physical therapy in the States, it's all required a doctorate degree now.
Okay, okay.
It started out as a bachelor's degree way back, and then they bumped it up to a master's degree,
Hmm.
and now they're at a doctorate level. So like we're just in school longer. Unfortunately, the loans are definitely rough.
Brutal.
Do I think it should be a doctorate degree? I don't know, man. There's a lot of conversation about that. I think you could still get it done in 4 years and still be an amazing physical therapist. I mean, that's the truth. I mean, I think we do learn more in school, but a lot of it actually you just forget so much of it because you actually don't do it in practice. You know what I'm saying? So they treat you to be a generalist, to be able to be comfortable in any setting that you practice in, but again, like, could they get that done in a shorter time frame? I think so. So that's just my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, they do a master's program here, and that's already
Yeah.
a lot of schooling. It's already enough for what you
Right.
need. And I mean, at the end of the day, and I haven't dealt with many physical therapists from the States, but in Canada, you get good at your job if you want to continue to learn from the experience you have with your individuals and other resources. I know as a
Right.
trainer, like I learned from the gym. I got my kinesiology. I almost went all the way to CEP, but like to be an exercise physiologist. And so I had all the schooling, but then it was like it was being a strength conditioning coach with both Gen Pop and athletes that teaches you everything. And so
Right.
I routinely, like, in the human body is a very complex thing. If you're seeing a physical therapist and you haven't really felt much progression and you're doing what they say, it's okay that you get, like, some people aren't still not going to be that good at their job. Like, that's the unfortunate
Right.
thing. So
Right.
I do believe a great portion of what makes someone good at their craft is going to be how much they care even after the education.
Yeah. Totally.
The one thing I remember hearing that really analyzed it well is when you finish your graduation, I think that you could say a little bit more credit for a doctorate, but when you finish and you get a degree, you are the least harmful to the public. And it's just like, that's really where you're at, right? Because most of the knowledge is still going to come from experience and application. So I think
Right.
that's really cool. Now, what pushed you into wanting to do the online coaching?
Yeah. So the practice I worked for after I graduated, it was a spine specialty clinic. So it was a concierge clinic. It was a lot of low back and a lot of neck. But being a concierge clinic, it was a private practice. They had fantastic equipment. Like, we literally had an aquatic treadmill, like a big tank. You just step in, fills up with water. Like, if people have back pain, it allows them to walk and jog with less pain because it's less stress on the joint if it's joint related or even post surgical, right? But yeah, squat rack, leg press, you name it. We had a bunch of amazing equipment that you don't always see at an outpatient physical therapy clinic. So I just started coaching people, a lot of barbell specific movements, and just found that people are just having amazing results with just general strength training, right? So my practice initially, I was more like hands-on focus, but it would be like 50-50, right? Like, half of my practice was hands-on, the other half was actual just exercise. Over time, I was using less and less and less manual therapy. And I was figuring out, man, like, I can just have somebody just do an exercise and it will still decrease their pain. And not only that, it's going to, I think, improve more overall health benefits as well versus just having somebody on the table, right? So as I was practicing longer, I was doing less and less manual therapy. And then I started like feeling myself evolve into kind of this coach mindset. And then also had a lot of patients. Like, they'd ask me, hey, like, do you do this on the side? And I'm like, you know what? No, but I have thought about it. And I think it'd be great because they're like, oh yeah, I think you'd be good because I feel like when I come and see you, like, I feel like you're a coach. Like, I feel like you're a trainer, but like, you're my physical therapist. And they're like, it's awesome. I'm like, yeah, that actually sounds pretty cool. So then, yeah, eventually just always had it in the back of my head. And then when we decided to do travel, I was like, this is the perfect opportunity because the travel physical therapy, again, it gives me more flexibility to launch and kind of push that. Whereas the grind, the full-time grind, like, it just felt busier. It just felt busier. It felt like a repeated thing, like, just wake up, go to work, just repeat over and over and over again. And so, yeah, with travel, it gives me way more flexibility to actually do the online coaching, which is nice. Yeah.
Absolutely. Online coaching allows you to help more people without having to be at the same spot at once. And if you're
Yeah.
only going to be an in-person coach, you literally have so much hours in the day, and you're going to have a real high price tag if you ever want to continue to
Yeah.
grow your income. And what people
Totally.
don't realize is it's like what people are doing on their own is what's really going to be the important part, right? You see,
Right.
if you can afford to see a trainer 4 days a week, for the rest of your life, by all means, go pay the guy. But
Right.
most people
That's hefty.
can't. And not to mention, like, if that's the kind of accountability you need, like, that's also a challenge. But
Right.
most people can't afford that, and also can, like, they need to take some accountability, be like, I can show up for myself despite the trainer not being there. And so when you have even a hybrid approach, but for sure, if someone can just handle online, you have someone that still cares if you show up. And that's an important part, because people could download programs. No one cares if you show up. And that's, to me, one of the most protective mechanisms for online trainers or coaches in general to AI. AI can already program for us.
Yeah.
But
Right.
it's like,
Absolutely.
it's still got some details kinks to work out, but it's like the information could be there. But the problem is that you don't care, the AI doesn't care. It'll pretend to care, but it doesn't.
Right.
When you have the online, you have someone that cares. So that's like still that go do your homework thing. And I feel like also, like, when you mentioned about the physical therapy thing, and I really want to dive into, the utility of just strength training for people, even in an injured population. I feel like that's actually probably one of the biggest missing components to long-term recovery from injuries as a physical therapist, because routinely most physical therapists, I've had like two that actually gave me online programming and accountability. I pay extra for it, but like, when you actually look at how much you pay for an in-person session for a physical therapist, very comparable, but better, because I'm doing it on my own routinely. And so when you normally see a physical therapist, they'll give you a piece of paper, maybe an email, and be like, do these exercises. You may or may not get a chance to do it in person with them. And then from there, you lose all accountability, because most people won't do that, right? They tell you to do it every day or 2 to 3 days a week, and you probably don't hit it. But then, like, as a trainer, we know you got to hammer the fucking home, right? Like, how are you going to get better unless we actually work on the strength and the imbalance and whatever tissue needs to be looser? Like, we need to actually fix this so it doesn't come back again. And so how do you feel about that gap in the out care, patient, kind of evolution when it comes to physical therapy?
Yeah, it's a good question. First, just want to address the AI thing. Couldn't agree more. I went to a Con Ed. It was with Barbell Medicine. Very, very great group. And at the course, one thing that stuck with me was two of the most important things that you can do during that first evaluation is rule number one is rule out red flags. Make sure nothing sinister is going on. And number two, just get the person to like you, right? Because we know that if you get that person to like you, you're going to have better outcomes, hands down. And that's what's so important about, obviously, online coaching. Like, if you have good rapport with that client, they're going to have better outcomes. The accountability is there. They're more likely to do what you want them to do. So it's so important. So, so to address that question, the gap, very great question, because here's the truth. There's a lot of physical therapists that don't know straight training, and that's just the truth, right? There isn't really many questions on our board exam about like just straight training, because there's so many other principles that they're trying to cover in this massive exam, right? So I've actually learned a lot of my straight training, but like through my own learning, right? And that's the thing. Like, you can go to a physical therapist, and just like every trainer, like every person is different. They've been exposed to different things. But here's the truth, man. There are some amazing coaches out there, and I'm sure like you're an amazing coach, that I would much rather some people, like patients who are in physical therapy, go to actually a coach that actually knows strength training, versus in physical therapy and doing some little light loaded exercises that aren't really going to create the adaptations that I feel like they need, right? But and it doesn't matter the population; it could be young or old. I think a lot of therapists, they see the age, and that creates a barrier of how hard they're going to push them, right? So like, oh, they're the person's 70, like they're old and fragile, like no, they can't deadlift, like they can't bench press, they can't squat. I've literally had people in their 70s, 80s bench, squat, deadlift, and they had amazing results, and it helped with their back pain, right? Um, so again, I think it comes back to the physical therapist. What have they been exposed to, and what are they doing? Because the truth is also there's a lot of healthcare professionals that don't walk the walk, right? Like you can't expect like a physical therapist to give you a good program like if they've never ran one themselves. Like then that and many have not.
Yeah.
Like they learned some exercises in through their training and all that, but then beyond that, like where's their interest at? Like where does it lie? But then you have just some older therapists who, were trained like back in the 90s, and they just don't want to change how they practice because they got into this comfortable state. They don't want to branch out and learn new concepts. And I think it's a downfall. I mean, of the practice, because I think everyone is absolutely appropriate to be loaded and loaded heavy as it meets the individual where they're at, right? Because that 70-year-old individual, like maybe bodyweight squatting is hard enough for them. You know what I'm saying? Like you start there and you just gradually progress the load, but you shouldn't stick with bodyweight forever, right? Like the key to training is it should always be challenging. The only difference is that you just get stronger, but like the exercise should continue to be challenging, right? Yeah, but it's a good question. Yeah.
No, it's totally valid. And it does seem like the culture around therapy is getting to be more movement based. And this
Yeah,
was from
definitely.
another therapist I talked to where they're like, we're trying to get people to move more. But like you mentioned, the
Yeah.
therapists from the 90s and before, it was always joint specific, small movements and
Hmm.
pain relieving just as much as they can, manual therapy, like massage it, back, whether it's ice or heat, and ice is even
Right.
questionable now. So it's
Right.
it's really like so important that people. This is actually something I took from one of my classes because it was about injury rehabilitation class that I did take, and one of the most imperative things about the stages of injury, like healing, is one of the most important things is for it to move. It's like if you
Yeah.
like at
100%.
the, like if it's immediately acute, yeah, it's a broken bone, don't fucking move it. But it's like
Right.
a separated shoulder, don't move it. But the moment
Right.
your separated shoulder can swing, you want to
Mm.
swing it. Like, and that's why those
Right.
little arm swings are super important, because if you just stay tucked in on that shoulder that's been separated, that's where
Hmm.
it's going to start creating adhesions. That's where it's going to start getting tighter and overcompensating. But the sooner
Hmm.
that you can start adding movement, not even like you mentioned, relative loads, that's where the healing process actually can get accelerated, provided you're
Hmm.
staying out of a good pain threshold, because the body's going to be allowing that recovery in a better range. And that's where people get so afraid from injury. But
Right.
it's a challenging thing. I love that you brought in though the squat, bench, and dead. We're power lift addicts, and I think we can just hit this on the head, like the utility of the heavy lifts.
Hmm.
You had mentioned, anyone can is it fair to say that you think anyone can do the squat, bench, and dead?
Yeah, as long as there's no like contraindications, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like no, yeah, nothing extreme from a medical standpoint. Absolutely.
Yeah, and like it's so interesting how we get this, like people get so afraid of it, right? So let's say you mentioned
Hmm.
like a 67-year-old
Hmm.
and you want them to get strong. They're going to be terrified of putting
Right.
a barbell on their back or doing a deadlift. But
Hmm.
let's try to break down for the people listening. You could be 40 or
Hmm.
50. Like they just think,
Hmm.
I'm not trying to be, a powerlifting, bro or something like that. But let's
Hmm.
explain to people why it's way more than a powerlifting meet or a bodybuilding exercise. Let's try to break this down. What's your best explanation on why people could have a great utility, again, no contraindications, to something like a
Hmm.
barbell back squat or some sort of a deadlift or some sort of a bench press?
Like the biggest reason why you should do it.
Yeah, so look, why you should
Oh
consider
man,
exploring it, the benefit to it.
yeah. I mean, the biggest ones is improvement in performance and overall health, right? I mean, we know that more muscle and more strength has a very, very positive correlation to how long you live. And there's just so many health benefits, so many. So, you got your improved bone mineral density, right? So, like all women, especially post menopause, should be strength training, 100%. Um, so you got improvements in bone mineral density. You have decreased risk of cardiovascular disease, decreased risk of cancer, decreased risk of that cancer even coming back just from strength training. So I tell all people, like, if they're having like issues with not wanting to strength train, that's what I typically pitch them. We know that strength training just twice a week can decrease your risk of anything that could kill you by anywhere from 15 to 20%. It depends on the study that you pull, right? So if you're going 15 to 20% strength training twice a week, and then you throw in your cardio, 150 minutes at least of moderate cardio, you're looking at another 15 to 20% decrease in mortality, right? So total, I tell them that is a 30 to 40% decrease, right? And I'll even mention even car accidents, right? And people are like, why car accidents doesn't make sense? I would much rather, like, if I got in a car accident, I would much rather my strength and my muscle to be up here, right, versus down here. Because when you're laying in that hospital bed, you're going to lose muscle and lose strength, right? But if your baseline is lower and then you lose even more on top of that, it is so much harder to recover. So you're trying to increase the chance of you actually making it out of the hospital after a car accident. So all these things are huge, but not to mention it's just a part of life, right? Deadlifting, squatting, pushing, pulling. I mean, everything that we do, it involves that. Like, do you want to be the grandparent that like sits around and can't play with their grandkids? Like, you can't even get down the floor anymore. You can't garden. You can't go on like a strenuous hike. Like those things, that's what's important. That's quality of life there. Beyond 60, 70 years old. And so it can truly, absolutely change people's lives. And I've seen it happen time and time and time again. So it's super important.
I love that. The couple major points there. It's the frailty that you should be afraid of when you're growing older. And you mentioned car crash. I always tell people, it's like, do you realize how frail you are if you fall? And Winnipeg, gets icy out here. You're going to fall. Like, it's just like, it's not even a question. You're going to fall. You actually can be less prone to falling because you'll be stronger and have a better fast twitch and better stability if you're stronger. Like, you're less prone to fall. Then if you do fall, how are you going to catch yourself? Well, you need to have some sort of strength and ability to catch your body. And if you can't, both of those things are going to end up with, like, especially if you're over the age of 60 or 70, that's actually a death sentence if you break your hip. And so it's so imperative. And I was really waiting for you to say that major thing about the main lifts. They are fundamental movement patterns. And that's what people miss about it, is like a squat pattern is like, getting in and out of a chair, but you're an athlete. It's jumping. It's anytime you bend your knee and you explode into something. And so, like you had mentioned, young to old, these movements are all over the place. And when you load a simple movement pattern, all other movement patterns that associate with it will be stronger. And so it's like the most simplistic way for you to load it. And I mean, like, that's where people kind of miss the goal of powerlifting. And you probably see it on social media now. I literally had a post about it just the other day where it's like, people want to be really excited about functional movement patterns. And it's like, there are things that you can call more functional. That's what we call them, fundamental movement patterns. But when we chase this, like anything in isolation or putting a barbell on your back because it's not like nature had it, it's like we complicate something that doesn't need to be so complicated, right? When it's just like, we're just trying to, as most people don't need that complexity. You know what I mean? They just need a simple pattern loaded. But, with that being said, let's just switch gears, because I've been too excited to talk about powerlifting with you. And because I want, so people have context, because this is what I think is also cool, because it says something so much about a coach's experience, because you're not just, like you mentioned, about like a physical therapist. that they don't train, right? Like you're
Right.
like, if I know my, physical therapist also did the sport I'm doing, whether it's powerlifting, hockey, boxing, like if you had done it, it's like instantly, I'm giving you a lot of credit because that's cool. You've been down the path.
Right.
And
Right.
so let's talk about your experience in the sport of powerlifting.
Yeah, totally. So I've only done 3 meets. All right. I was first exposed to just barbell lifting in general in high school. I wrestled in high school. But it was just a general strength and conditioning class, right? We did squat, bench, deadlift, and all the general main movements. Um, so really like didn't get into it though, I would say when I was in grad school. Because like from high school going into grad school, like I worked out, but it was like not as much structure. Like I still loved going to the gym, but I wasn't training, right? I was just
Mm-hmm.
working out. But then in grad school, got into actually training, programming. So that was around 2018, 2019. Then I've only done 3 meets. So first meet was in 2021 and I did two in 2022. Um, Loved it. And it was just an amazing experience. It kind of gave me that sensation like in wrestling, like right before you go on the mat, you just get this like nervous, hyped up, like amped feeling. And like right before like you walk out on that platform, it just like reminded me of that. Like you're just so ready just to tear it up. Some people like react positively to that kind of energy, and some people like they don't perform as well. But it depends on the person. But anyways, that's what reminded me of it. It just amped me up so much. It's definitely addictive, to say the least. And obviously, just like setting PRs is also just like a ton of fun, right? I mean, who doesn't love a good PR? But yeah, so after 2022, I was still training for the most part powerlifting, and then after my daughter was born, I was still training. Like right before she was born, I hit a 3 times body weight deadlift, and I was just
Nice.
pumped because I set the goal. I was like, I gotta hit this like before she's born. So hit it in February, and then she was born in March. Then after that, like training as far as going to the gym, like it took a little bit of a backseat. I was still like working out at work because we had awesome equipment, obviously home stuff. But like going to the gym and spending like 2 hours powerlifting, like that had to take a back seat because
Yeah.
there's just no way. Like, um, so then, has still been gradually dabbling in it. Right now, I'm kind of like powerlifting currently. I'm just keeping my numbers like pretty steady, and more
Mhm.
so, I'm trying to put some more lean tissue on. So I'm more so like hypertrophy focused training currently right now. And that's been a ton of fun. So, and I know, hey, like if I get some more lean tissue on my frame, I'm likely going to get stronger. Like my lifts are going to come back up once I start practicing the lifts more. Um, yeah. So that's kind of like how I got into it. What like really one of my colleagues in grad school, he was big into lifting, and so really to start talking to him, I literally learned like more from this guy about like strength training than like what I did in class. And then I started finding people like on social media. So barbell medicine was a big one that had like a big influence of training the big three, but also training people who have pain. Um, yeah, yeah. So it's kind of the journey.
That's awesome. I totally
Yeah,
know what you mean. The feeling of going onto the platform. So you did weightlifting, I did boxing, and
type. Yeah.
it is. And it's interesting that you mentioned this because I didn't even notice it my first meet. I saw a lot of people getting hype and
Mm-hmm.
like a ton in this last meet. And a couple guys that I know were watching the meet, the one I was at yesterday, and they're like, "You're so calm up there. Like, why aren't you getting hyped?" And I just realized I'm like, it's not good for me because
Yeah.
I can be like, I need to think about my method. I need to
Mm-hmm.
think about my cues. I need to think, and I'm going to push. Like, and
Right.
I'm
Right.
also willing to bet if I've had like 5, 6, 7 meets where I even know my cues better, I know my technique inside and out, and it's just like, let's fucking go. Like, I think I can get to that point. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if I go in there smelling salts, actually my coach, the other guy who was working with,
never done it. Yeah.
we're like this. Yeah. Like I've smelled them before, but like, so I've seen these guys do that. And then they do this slap on the back.
Yeah.
And
Right.
it was so funny because my coach has got like massive hands. Okay. This guy's got just huge mitts. It would just squish a basketball. And the guy he's working with me that day, he's a younger guy, but he's like, "Hey, ready?" Smack. We're all looking over because it was so fucking loud. He's like, "That's enough." And he's like, and then he goes out, hits his fucking lift. And it's like, these things can work, but part of me also thinks about this, and I'm not trying to like take a step back to not work hard.
Mhm.
It is an important concept. I always, reiterate this. Stan Efferding quote: "If you want to be healthy, don't compete." And I do want to compete, but I'm trying to do it in the healthiest way possible.
Right.
And I feel like if it requires me to go to that dark place, to that fucking like I'm willing to break my back place, I'm honestly not. Like,
Right.
I want to go as far with my PRs. I want to do
Right.
like 95%. I want to do the safest I can in something really unsafe, because
Yeah. Right.
I do want to have kids in the future and not be like, "Hey, Dad, why can't you get up and down?" And not to mention, what kind of a coaching, amplification is that? It's like, "Oh yeah, you should powerlift. Why don't you anymore? I broke my back in powerlifting." Like, that's not a good, message for people either. And
Exactly.
some people are willing to sacrifice that. And I think that there's a very smart way to do it, but you just need to build it up slowly over time. Luckily, my coach actually believes the same thing. Like, he keeps me away from my true 1 rep maxes all the time because like, we just don't need to hit it. And he's like, you only have a handful of true 1 rep maxes in your life because you don't want to discover it in the wrong way. And so I really, I value that idea, that ramp up though. And it's getting over that anxiousness of eyes are on you and it's about this moment. And so working towards that. And like you mentioned, it's so capped. I think here's the other cool thing you probably agree with. Because wrestling was the other one you did, right? Wrestling is you versus another person. It's going to be fucking hard, right? Like, I've understood that wrestling is one of the hardest like martial arts. Just fucking push. Your cardio has to be great. You have to be strong. It's so intense. And boxing's similar. It's a bit more aerobic because you get breaks, but you have to be intense and you're fighting another human. So the event can be fun, but it kind of fucking sucks, right? Yeah. You also said it. We're just trying to fucking set PRs. Like, the only really challenging thing is like getting yourself there healthy, and you're going to get nervous in front of people, but it's just sweet to lift heavy shit, right?
It is.
So the whole process is, I found it a lot more, I want to say sustainable, but a purely enjoyable process for the most part from what I've seen so far. So, the whole powerlifting thing, I find interesting how people go about it in different ways, or what they learned from it. And I'd be curious to know, what did you learn in your powerlifting journey that most people might not know, maybe about the powerlifts or about strength training in general?
That's a good question. I mean, I couldn't agree more with your coach, man. Just go slow. Jeez. I feel like a lot of people, we love hitting PRs, but like, you don't want to get PR greedy. And I think a lot of people get too greedy with the PRs, and it's like they're trying to set PRs every week. And I'm like, you're asking for it. Like you cannot outrun the adaptations. The adaptations will happen, but you need to give them time. And I think that's where the load management piece is so important. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's so important, because it could be like, it's not that deadlifting is dangerous, but like what's going on with your program? And I think it always, like, look back at the programming, right? Because it could be like you have some set for like a certain weight, but like, what if sleep is off, or what if your nutrition's off? You got more stress, but like, and you're still like trying to go to the gym and hit this PR. Probably not ideal, right? Like, so the balance has got to be there with like a true strength sport. It's not just like what's happening in the gym. Like, obviously the effort's got to be there when you're in the gym, but like, what are you doing outside the gym as well? Very, very important. But honestly, I mean, I think I was definitely a little PR hungry, like at the start, because literally I did a meet. It was like December of 2021. I literally did a meet 8 weeks later, and still like my total went up like great. Still felt good. And then I did another meet. It was probably about 3 months after that, right? But then after that meet, I ended up hitting a PR. Like I pulled off blocks. It was like 425, but it was like a like 1 to 2 inch block. It was like foam pads. After that, I felt this like huge like burning sensation like in my glute, and I was like, that was not good. That set me back a little bit. Like I'm not even lying. Like something that shouldn't have happened, right? Um, have I had some injuries like from powerlifting? Yeah, not a ton. More back related, but that's what gave me a lot of appreciation of these people coming in at the spine clinic with back pain, and like being able to show them like, hey, like you can do this even with pain, and actually may help your pain feel better. It was wild though. Some days, like while I was having pain or discomfort, I could back squat. Actually made my pain feel better. Like actually decreased it, right? Um, One of the trainers that was at the clinic, he kind of explained it where like if you add a little bit of compression to the disc, it can actually increase some stiffness in the spine. Because if there is a little bit of shear going on at the spine, that could be introducing some pain or discomfort. So that loading the spine, as long as it's not like super heavy, could actually create some stiffness in there and decrease some shear that's happening. I don't know, whether that was true or not. Sounded good, but some days I could squat and like pain would go down literally from like a 5 to like a 2. I'd be like, holy smokes, this is amazing, right? And then also just learning different cues of like what made the movement just feel better, even with pain or discomfort. But look, I'm gonna tell you the biggest risk factor of having pain like with lifting is one of them is a prior history of a back injury, right? And I don't even know how it happened. I was in high school at the time. I was living in Europe, and for some reason had like crazy sciatic pain. I was going to the gym, and it's like I wasn't powerlifting. Like I was just doing like general stuff, and it was just one of those freak things that came on. But it was not fun, man. It was like sharp stabbing pain, like down the back of the leg. I remember at night it was the worst. Eventually it went away. I got back to lifting, and like then it became in the rear view. But having any kind of history of injury, you do have a little bit of a higher chance of having a re-injury later down the road, right? So that's super important. That's like a main question I ask for people that have back pain. It's like do you have a prior history of injury? Because that can be very telling. And sometimes like a lot of people do, like old injuries that come back later on down the road.
I really, yeah, you're playing with crazy weight. It's going to be scary things in your body. I do really love that phrase though, PR greedy. It's a good phrase, right? You're PR hungry, PR greedy, and we're all PR hungry, but it's like, don't get greedy and understand that you can have times where you're making gains. You're going to have times where you're not making much, but it's like an inch by inch by inch kind of thing. And then you move mountains, right? But it's only by inches. And that's kind of like if you have staying power and if you can find enjoyment in a very simple process, squat, bench, and dead accessories, squat, bench, and dead. If you can have that, you will lift incredible things. People don't realize that it's like not a lot of people who aren't in the sport, most people who aren't in the sport don't realize that powerlifting is a neuromuscular behavior, brain to muscle. Like it is not whether or not you're building muscle. You can, but you don't have to. And you can get like, there's a reason why you're doing 3 times body weight is because your body didn't have to get bigger for you to get stronger. It just had to understand how to do it faster and more explosive. And it's a neurological connection. It's a practice. And if people see it as a practice, just realize that practice, as corny as it is, not necessarily makes perfect, it makes excellence. It makes it really efficient. It's the way that I try to explain to people is like golf, right? Think about how hard you want to squeeze. You're an okay golfer. You want to hit that driver far. The harder you try to hit it, the worse it is. And you look at Tiger Woods or any like pro golfer, and they hit it only as hard as they need to. every time. They know exactly how to explode into their hips. And guys that weigh 20, 100 pounds less than you, there's no weight class in box or in golf for a reason, because you just need to hit it perfectly efficiently. And that's kind of why powerlifting is about the efficiency. And so if you give it that idea of like, I'm just, every time you're in there, you're doing reps of practice, it can maybe humble you to realize, hey, I just need to always think about doing this well and explosive and balanced. Like when I look at my last meet there, like the one that was most questioned was like, I didn't do it well. Like, I just know I didn't have the efficient lift. I know that it wasn't the right line, because if it's done well, it's like a good golf swing. It fucking just flies. It just pops off the head. You're like, how do I do that every time? And your lifts can be just like that. The other major thing you mentioned about that is just like it's load management.
Yeah.
You know, people don't realize, and I didn't even realize how important it was to stay away. You don't even touch that 1 rep max. You need to be under it to have enough bar speed to develop power. And if you're playing with those, because I had this guy beside me one day in the gym. He asked me for a spot, and he was trying to do 2 plates or something like that. And I'm like, okay. And he struggles. He doesn't get it. And I was like, okay. And he's like, yeah, I'll try it again in 5 minutes. I'm like, oh, you're probably not going to get it. Like it's like, I'm sorry. Like that was the test. Like you don't know how, your body doesn't know how to do it. Why don't you consider lightening the load so you can be more efficient at this movement? He's like, well, what do I got to work on? It's like, well, bring in your elbows, put your feet on the ground, and then try to move the bar faster. He lightened it. He was like mad, but he took my advice, which I was surprised about. And of course he completed a lift and it looks a lot better. And so it's hard for people to wrap their head around technique. And that's the key to getting strong. The other thing I'm really glad you hit on, because this is, we had already talked about, it's like to do the sport healthy can be done, but it's really difficult, right? And it also, like, to me, it made me more concerned about my joint health, because if I was bodybuilding, I'm like, I'll fucking lift around it. But like performance matters so much, and because you can bodybuild with light loads, you can build muscle from 5 to 30 reps. Like, it's a matter of like, you have to take in a lot of load, so your joints have to be as good as possible, and they're still going to hurt probably, right? It was funny, my powerlifting coach had good advice on both my meets for my squat. I go into my first meet and I was like, my hip's kind of sore. He's like, okay, squat narrow and take Tylenol. And this last one, my knee's starting to hurt. Okay, squat wide, take Tylenol. And get through the lift. And because like at that point you gotta go. But I'm curious from your perspective, because this is a really cool concept. It's kind of like, you know, me as a training nutrition coach, planning for my training, planning my nutrition. How do you manage your own injuries? Like, how do you manage and understand your own injury prevention, rehabilitation? Is it difficult for you? Is it still like, do you feel like you have good insight? Is like, I'd be curious on that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, current injuries, I mean, you could say past now, because like I don't have any back pain now. No hip pain, no knee pain. Grateful. But even when I had injuries, the big thing, myself, and I'll tell, you know, patients, clients, there are so many things you can do. There are absolutely so many things that you can still do, right? So for instance, if hinging sucks, like if conventional deadlift sucks, like how does sumo feel, right? Or is it the depth, right? If pulling from the floor, that hurts, like maybe you pull up blocks, or maybe you do rack pulls, right? Same thing for bench press. If going down to the chest hurts a little bit, all right, maybe you do pen presses, right? Same thing for the squat, right? Maybe depth hurts, maybe you go to a box, right? You can mess around with the high bar versus low bar. Maybe you go front squat. There are so many things of working around injuries like that, and there's so much nuance to that, because it really depends on the individual that you have in front of you. But I've seen it so many times where like people, they get hurt even if the limb is, like, you can even say immobilized, right? They just feel like they, like, okay, for ACL tear, for instance, right? Knee, like your knee's in a brace. Why can't you go to the gym still and bench press? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, and these are things that I think, like, either a trainer or definitely physical therapist should be telling people. Like, okay, your right knee, you have an ACL tear, you can still get your other freaking leg strong, right? Like that's like you can bench press. Like, what football player wouldn't want a bigger bench press? And so why are you just sitting around? Like, I think that is important, is to helping people realize there are so many things you can do if you have an injury. And I think that's super important because it's only going to improve your outcomes, right? And then making that transition back to the field, if it's an athlete, or back to your sport, like you're not starting from scratch. Like, you've still been lifting, you're still maintaining more strength, more muscle, more of these, central nervous system adaptations that occur with lifting. Like, why stop, right? So you can train around injuries, and that's what's super important.
Yeah. So it sounds like from your experience, you were just aware that you didn't have to limit yourself. And I think that's where so many people get limited. And, people will work around injuries in a bad way, but you kind of are supposed to work around injuries and still treat the injury. I'm so glad you mentioned, unilateral training. It's this, it's just such a simple thing. If you have a bad limb, you can't work it. The other limb can still be worked. And there's something called cross education that
absolutely
you continue to work that one side. The other side will actually learn a bit of it. This is why if you pick up a pen, you can kind of write with your bad hand. Like, you've never practiced it, but you can like scribble like a 2-year-old, but it'll have some letters, and maybe a 3 or 4-year-old. And so the main thing there is you don't have to hold yourself back, and that's you holding yourself back, right? Don't get me wrong. There's going to be times where you're bedridden injuries, but I think, it sounds like you're just very aware of that part of the process, which I think is great. We had talked a little bit about this when we were chatting. I think it would be great if we have this discussion so people understand the difference between building muscle and strength training and building strength. And how could you explain the difference in how someone would do their training? Why, how, if someone wants to do both, someone wants to do one but not the other, like maybe someone wants to build strength but not get bulky, as the classic goes it. So how would you make people understand the difference in the training and how they progress?
Yeah, totally. So first, just ask yourself, what is strength, right? I think people need to realize strength is an outcome measure. It's an outcome measure. And there are many adaptations that you can train to improve your strength. Okay. Hypertrophy, trying to gain more lean tissue, gain more muscle mass, is just one of the adaptations that you can train for to improve your strength, right? So with strength, there are adaptations that occur from a central nervous system standpoint, and then also from the peripheral standpoint, right? So peripheral, we're talking about increases in tendon stiffness and increases in muscle mass, right? As far as central, you're looking at motor unit recruitment and then improving coordination. And then also it kind of goes along with a decrease in the antagonist coactivation, essentially. So if a joint is trying to do a motion, you want the prime mover to do the majority of that motion. You don't want the body giving energy out to a muscle that isn't involved with that action, right? So you'll see that in a lot of trained lifters. So you'll see that their decrease in activation and decrease in coactivation in the antagonist muscle, the opposite muscle, the prime mover, is less. And that's what you want, because you want everything moving towards that prime mover. So, and that's what's super important is, again, strength is an outcome measure, right? And I heard this recently, as far as you could say training for hypertrophy. This is the most simple way to put it. Training for hypertrophy, you could say you can do 3 sets of 5 working close to failure. So saving 1 or 2 reps left in the tank. Training for strength, just flip it. Do 5 sets of 3, but instead of saving 1 or 2 reps left in the tank, save 3 or 4, right? So you're looking at a little bit less fatigue happening with the strength movements, because every repetition that you do, you want the least amount of fatigue as possible. So that's why you're just flipping into 5 sets of 3. You're still getting the practice reps in, so now you're improving your coordination. Whereas obviously training for hypertrophy, you want to take it a little bit closer to failure, right? So that's kind of the simplest way to put it. 3 sets of 5 close to failure for hypertrophy, just flip it for strength. 5 sets of 3, save a little bit more reps in the tank, maybe 3 or 4.
I like that. Very simple numbers. People need simple. That's a big thing, right? One of the things I try to point out to my clients is that it helps if you are, like, I see strength is a matter of power production, right? And like you say, neuromuscular efficiency. So people understand while we're talking, we're hammering this home. You're talking about, how the brain works with the muscle, is the right muscle working? Think of a child wobbling. They're learning their feet. Like, the muscles aren't firing right. Think about when you're intoxicated. This is actually a really simple way to think about it. You have inhibitory nerves and excitatory nerves. And so if your inhibitory nerves are actually being attacked by the alcohol, which is what happens, that's why you're wobbly, because you don't know when to stop moving. So your hands are wobbling, you're all over the place, and you psychologically say things you shouldn't because you don't know when to stop. And so when you're sober and you're strength training, it's important to know when's the right movement. And so we were talking about the bench press prime example, how many people will flare out their elbows, and that's an inefficient movement. You can do it, but we're not firing off the right muscles that are going to make the most efficient and explosive pattern. And I think the major thing I try to draw attention for people is that strength is about force production. It's about the movement efficiency, really fast. It's the heaviest load you can do fast. And what I really try to get my clients to look at is, like, if you want it to be for strength, the moment that bar speed starts slowing down too much, like you feel like you're not producing force and it's almost like a deceleration happening during your set, you can put your weight down. Because if you are decelerating, it's not accelerating through the weight. It's okay if it's hard to accelerate, but if it's slowing down, we're no longer generating force. We're actually just too fatigued and more likely going to get into compensation patterns, could have bad form. But if you're building muscle, let's hit that. I want you to barely be able to move it. So you go until you achieve nothing but slow reps and it hurts, right? And so my whole thing that I try to guide people on, because it's a pretty big spectrum when it comes to hypertrophy, that you can build muscle. It's not super efficient to do 30 reps, but you can still build muscle comparably. It's like, it's just valuable to know if you don't have a lot of equipment, you can still build muscle. But achieve the point where you can't move the weight fast. So that near failure point is so important, that mechanical tension. And I'm not going to lie, I learned about the concept about mechanical tension on social media maybe 2 years ago. And the only, we knew time at attention when I was going to school. We knew the rep ranges. And I still remember trying to talk to coworkers, what is the goal for hypertrophy? And only recently is data finally coming around that mechanical tension is that big driver. And the other thing too is you can push not all muscles, but a lot of muscles, as many sets near failure per week, as long as you can recover. With strength recovery, you can do it, but you really got to, that's so tentative to a person in the load, right? So recovery, I think, is someone asked me if they can train sore. If they're trying to bodybuild, trying to put on muscle, I'm like, if you can handle it, you can handle it. But if it's powerlifting, I'm going to worry, right? I'm be like, okay, how sore are you? Can you generate force? Is it going to be slow bar speed?
Right.
So I think I love hearing your version. I just wanted to kind of put my 2 cents in on similar ideas, but just so people can see more intent, especially when you're thinking of strength training. You want to be powerful. Oh, one last thing for everyone to know too. You want to build muscle. You got enough protein and be in a slight surplus. It's not going to happen by accident. And so we said, you don't want to get bulky. Don't. I literally had someone say this the other day because she was afraid of going heavy. She's like, oh, I don't want to get bulky. Don't eat too much. You'll be fine. You're coming in here once a week. You're going to be okay. Right. Yeah. So, but let's cap off here. I want to know more about what's coming down the pipeline for you. What's Strong Ambition Podcast, what's your most recent ambition? It could be work, it could be life, it could be anything that you're really excited coming down.
Oh, it's a good question. I like it. Ambition. That's good. So really, man, this is simple, man. I just want to continue to be like the best father I can be and just be there. And that's what's important. It's just the balance of full-time work, coach people online, than spending time with family. So that's a big one. No huge like training goals currently. Hypertrophy training right now. Still doing some strength stuff in the background, but not as crazy right now. But yeah, man, that's really it. Simple. No, nothing over the top. Yeah, man.
No, it's good. It's probably one of the, if I would believe it's probably the most important ambition is to be a good parent. I
Yeah.
don't think it gets much more complex or difficult or high stakes than that. And I said a lot on this podcast when I have fathers, but I'm going to say it again. It's the three biggest things that you're going to do in life is going to be what you're going to do, your career, who's beside you when you do it, you picking your partner, and who are you going to show how that's done. And that last one is the hardest one because it's super complicated. You got to pretend that you know what you're doing and you don't. And so
Right.
it's probably one of the most, like, I think it is one of the most, I'll just say it, it's the most important thing that people do because
Yeah, for sure.
for people to make more people is the most fucking important thing. Right. So it's,
right.
yeah, I think it's great. And I love hearing that you still have this ambition in your back of your mind. Is like, I want to get back to that weight. Is that fair to say? Like you still have that itch a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. Like I'm hoping. I mean, I'm kind of leaning towards setting a PR, just breaking it. Because I've only deadlifted 3 times body weight one time, like from the floor, right? I did the 425, but I was off blocks, and I'm just itching now. I'm just like, let's get it. So the goal is just to build up some more lean tissue, then do some more powerlifting focused stuff on the back end. So it's coming, man, this year.
I love it. That's super
Yeah.
exciting. Well, this is a really fun chat. I really appreciate you meeting up with me, man. I'm certain we're going to probably link up for another chat in the future. This is so much fun. So thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Ron.
Thanks, Justin. That was a great chat. Thank you for listening. I do want to just highlight a few notes for you on this one, because it's cool when you can talk to a physical therapist that powerlifts. That's a pretty unique position, right? Someone who is worried about injuries isn't worried about powerlifting, and you realize that it can be quite useful. I was talking to him after, and he said he had one of his severe back pain clients turn into deadlifting and is still deadlifting to this day, hitting PRs. And it's not that everyone has to deadlift, but I tell you, if you get into it, even if there's a variation that you're more comfortable with, you can not only hit PRs, but you will feel very strong from it. And you'll be a lot less scared from picking things off the ground. The really cool experience I got to see firsthand was someone who came to me, a client of mine. She had never run before, never weightlifted before. She was into running for fitness. So she just wanted to strength train for the sake of getting better at running. She knew she should do some. So she came to see me and I helped her figure out a program and her nutrition plan. And we started with body weight. Like she was doing everything basic. And then we went into a little bit of weights, holding a dumbbell. And then we went into heavier dumbbells. And then eventually I got her interested in trying the barbell. And then it was about, by the time she left, she was so into deadlifting, squatting, everything. She was excited to just keep doing it. She didn't care about her running. She still ran. It was still a thing, but it wasn't her pastime. Powerlifting was. And I saw her follow up 3 years later. She traveled. She came back in town. And she had, I think it was almost 135 pounds on her back. And for a female, that is good weight. And it just goes to show you that you can change the way you feel about something once you experience it. And if you're scared about something, but like the deadlift, he mentioned about deadlifting off blocks, I really recommend people try a rack pull. And it doesn't have to be super deep in that stretch position like a conventional, but it can just be just around below your knee height, right around that position where it's kind of bent over, but not all the way. And you can load that bar a lot safer and practice bracing and pushing from your hips and legs at the same time. It's a great exercise. I get a lot of my clients to do is a safe hip hinge movement. And maybe you don't want to put a barbell on your back, but maybe you could do, a heavy leg press and get excited about leg press because that's still a squat pattern. Maybe you can get excited about a hack squat. Maybe that is your barbell back squat. You use a hack squat. Maybe you use a Smith machine. But what's helpful to understand is that anytime you do a knee bending squat like pattern, from doing the squat training in your program, you're going to be better at that in sport and life. So it's something that can help you be more functional and actually reduce injuries. As he mentioned, he mentioned for himself, you get into training, it actually is a part of the process of healing. I feel like this is what's really missed when people look at the gym. They're so afraid of getting hurt. They're so afraid of getting hurt. It's like, you should be afraid of doing something wrong, but just because it's heavy doesn't mean you'll get hurt. And so not necessarily being afraid of the weight can really kind of help you. And especially if you find ways, and that's why the barbell is so effective. A goblet squat, for example, you put a dumbbell in front of you and you go up and down. There's only a certain amount of the population that's going to be actually taxing enough on their legs. When you're brand new, for sure, that's where Sandra started. And then when you move forward, eventually your legs are too strong for that. Your arms are going to be the problem, not your legs. So then you do 2 dumbbells, and then eventually that's still not enough. You're going to need to do something heavier. Now, maybe you go into single leg work and you do a really heavy Bulgarian split squat. That's a way that you don't have to have a barbell if you only have dumbbells at home. But I really recommend people taste the barbell a little bit. Start with a Smith machine that's on rails. That's fine. And then dare to challenge that weight a little bit. Now, obviously, I'm biased. I just came from my powerlifting meet. So naturally, I am going to encourage a lot of it. If you're not comfortable with it and you would rather do machine work, it's your life. I'm always just happy when people are lifting something heavy. I just encourage this because we just had someone on there that treats people for injury to tell you, you don't have to be afraid. It's something that you can challenge. And I hope some of the other stuff really helps you when it comes to understanding the difference between muscle building and strength. I hope those, his idea of, the sets and reps, I think it makes a lot of sense. And, the idea of strength being neuromuscular, I think it's super helpful for you to understand. And if you're injured, you don't have to take a step back. You can train the one good side. You can train the other body parts. I've had many injuries throughout my athletic and training career. When I had an injury, it was not, just stopping moving forward. It was not that you would stop moving forward. You stop moving forward in a direction, but you find a new direction to move forward in. So I'll take, for example, when I first started getting shoulder issues. Oh, I can't push, can't do any pressing, can't do any overhead pressing. That's it. Those are the only things I can't do. I can still pull. So I'm going to get a really strong back. I can still do legs. I'm definitely getting stronger legs. I can still do cardio and core. Definitely going to have better cardio and core. If anything, you can get more focused on these things because normally I don't want to say distracted, you would have to share your energy with the other focus. So now you have an opportunity just to focus on something you weren't focusing on as much. So despite an injury, don't let it hold you back, right? And as I was mentioning, maybe it's you holding you back in that essence. Don't let the injury define you. I've been really interested to hear how many people talk about how injury is so psychological. We don't even fully understand all the mechanisms all the time around pain, like whether it's a part of the nervous system that's firing up unnecessarily. It might not even be tissue damage. So if you act hurt, you can be more hurt. So this is just something to take into context when you're thinking about managing your injuries or being afraid of training, so that you don't always have to be in that identity, so to speak. And I think it's an important thing because it can definitely happen to people, and then it can make everything else more difficult and trying to be healthy, trying to be fit, because injuries can happen. Most coaches, smart strength coaches, will say you want to be injury resilient. You can't be injury proof. It's very unlikely. There's very, 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 very few people who don't get hurt at all. But you can be resilient. And then even if you do get hurt, your muscle tissue may be stronger, so it's not a severe injury. As we mentioned, if you get in a car crash, are you too frail? If you fall, are you too frail? Because if you have training, even if you get hurt, you're far less hurt and you have far quicker bounce back. So I hope this gave you some context. I hope this gives you more confidence in the need and the desire for strength training, as a couple of powerlifting bros really giving you some good ideas and good concepts to make you feel better about how much that can fit in your life. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. Don't hesitate to check out Justin's info. I'll leave his info in the show notes. And please share this with anyone that you think might be curious about powerlifting or needs to know they don't have to be scared of powerlifting, because that could really help them. And it also helps this little podcast grow. Thank you so much for listening today. And honestly, thank you as a listener. I appreciate you taking your time to listen to these stories that hopefully help you push yourself in your own ambition, in your own direction. Because we know life is not about the pursuit of happiness, but rather the happiness within your pursuit. And I'll catch you next time.